Right, just a bit of an update on the jig I'm making. So basically I've just got on with the front end part, and I'll take you through what I've done. It's all welded together. I've tried making it so it will work from a Mark 1 shell all the way up to a Mark 7. There's going to be some other bits I've got to do when I do get it, when I do have a Mark 4 shell, which would be Rufus. But obviously all I've got to work with at the moment is the Mark 3 shell, which all the subframe bits, mounts and stuff are the same on the Mark 1, Mark 2 and Mark 3. So I'll just show you what I've done. So basically, obviously from the last video I had the jig frame that I made, and so what I've tried doing is I've looked at NDF Owens or Owens Fabrications photos and stuff he puts online or on Instagram, and basically he kind of put some 4x2 bits of box section on top of the jig, and then he's made some front and rear subframe sort of mount type things to sort of line everything up and so on. So basically what I've done, obviously I've got this box that is part of the jig, but part of the main frame, and then I've got a box that slides over that box. I've kind of drilled a fixing point through the side here on both sides, which as you can see I've drilled through the main sort of movable framework. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put it on the main jig, just so then I can show you what I've kind of done. Obviously doing this with two people is a bit easier, but I can't do it on my own. Slides on like so. Yeah, so basically I had a Mark 3 subframe. I had a Mark 4 onward subframe, and I've cut the top mounts off of it, and I've welded them to two little posts. I'll show you a bit more detail in a minute. So that will fit on a Mark 4 onwards with the tower bolts, and then what I've done, I've also drilled and tapped each side of the top mount, so it also works with a twin bolt subframe. And then I've also so the Mark 1 and Mark 1 to Mark 3 rear subframe mounts are different to a Mark 4 onwards. So for now, obviously I've done it for Mark 1, 2 and 3. So you've got a hole there and a hole underneath the bulkhead, toe board, on both sides. So I've made the subframe, the jig frame, to bolt into those two bolt holes. Obviously I've braced that in, so you can see on top of there the tail bolt will go in there, and then obviously the twin bolt will go in there, and that's obviously the same both sides. As you can see, so I've put these plates on. That's for the lower bolt, and obviously the upper bolt on the Mark 1 to Mark 3. When I get a Mark 4 onwards shell, I can then just, because I don't know the exact positions, I've put the plate on this side, and I can just drill that through later on. Yeah, so I literally cut these off the top and kind of use the tail bolt part of it. So I'll kind of show you. So that will effectively lower into there. Bolts that go through there. So obviously the two bolts either side locate that jig frame into the main frame, and obviously because this Mark 3 shell is a twin bolt, let's move. So I'm crap with videoing. What I actually did, I used the spacers as well. I didn't really need to, I suppose, but I just did it as a matter of course. Yes, basically that then bolts to there and there. And then I put the two bolts in this side and that side, and that basically lines up the whole of the front end. When obviously I've got to do the floor for this one, so what I will end up doing is taking this shell off of the jig, and once I've made the rear frame jig frame, whatever, the front and rear will line up to this shell. Now I'm assuming this shell is correct in measurement. I do have a load of measurements I can check. So basically this front end is now set up for the tail bolts and the rear subframe mounts. I haven't put anything for the front subframe mounts, because generally once all the floor and all the shell is back together, the front end, when I do that, I can just put the subframe in for this car and line it up properly with that. So yeah, it's so tail mount, lower subframe mounts, it's all braced together, welding's all okay. It's not perfect, but it's solid. So the next job is to basically do the same, a similar thing. I'll send Keith some photos of what Owen's Fabrications do, and just to give an idea of what I'm trying to achieve as well. So I've already got these rear parts box sleeved on and drilled and bolted through, and I just need to, so basically I'm going to pick up the rear heel board subframe mounts, the boot subframe mounts, and I'm also going to put a tube in to pick up the shock absorber mount. and then that should be everything I really need to make sure the front to rear is all sort of in line to match the measurements of a floor and the shower. So yeah, so that's the next step. I'm not going to film it all. I'm just going to, once I've done it, I'm just going to video it like I've done now. So yeah, I'll be back soon. So next step was the rear subframe mounting frame for the jig. So I'm just going to show you that. Then I'll probably turn you. I'll put it on the car, and then just explain what I've done. So so basically this is it. It's almost like a rear subframe that slides onto the jig frame. So obviously I've picked up the rear heel board mounting points for the subframe, and then I've put these diagonals on to pick up the rear mounts for the rear subframe. I've just obviously put a brace along. There was no movement between these two rear parts because I fully welded the front box sections together, but I'll just put the brace there just as a precaution. As you can see, some of my welding is a bit hit and miss, but I am getting there. And I know this is 2, 3, 4 mil steel and it's a piece of cake to weld, blah blah blah, but I'm getting the knack of it now. I mean, that's really poor, just too much weld there, but you can see the penetration's there, it's getting better, almost nice and smooth and neat. So yeah, I'll put it on the car, sorry, on the jig, then I'll explain a bit more. Right, so there it is, back on the car, sorry, back on the jig. I'll just show you around it while it's on. So as you can see, I've got obviously the mounts here. I've just used these trunnions for now, just because the bolts I had were too long. So it's the same both sides. It's nice and tight up to where it should be. Holes line up perfectly. I've got a small bolt that goes through there and tightens up to secure that in to the main jig frame. And then obviously I've got the subframe mounts on the rear which bolt up. As you see the holes there, so I'll just that's supposed to be a bit loose. So they go in there. That's supposed to move when it's welded. Obviously the same this side. So in theory, when I take this shell off the jig and then I put the floor on there, it should all line up. And then obviously I'm going to put a new boot floor in this shell, which I'll put on the jig with the main floor, and weld them together using all the front and rear mounting points, and obviously the measurements I've got on some bits I printed off the internet, just to make sure everything does line up. And then in theory, when I detach the main body from the floor and boot floor sections, in theory it should just sit straight back over it and all line up. That's the theory anyway. So other options I've got to do on the jig, which I'm not going to do at the moment because I think they're going to get in the way, is basically put some mounts in for the shock absorber points. At this current time, I don't see what benefit they'll have, because I'm not planning on taking apart the arches, because they're all good. So I don't see any benefit of putting them on, but I can weld a plate on here, bolt that through, and then obviously bolt through the top if I need, put a plate on the top, and then obviously bolt it through the top if I need to, but I can do that later. I can obviously add to this as I go, but the main things for me at the moment is obviously the rear mounting points and the front mounting points of the rear subframe to the hill board and boot floor. So yeah, so next job is I will take the shell off the jig, put the main new floor on the jig and just make sure everything does line up on that. Then I'll get the boot floor out and put that in position as well and see where we're at.